Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is Team Fun, and I am blessed to be able to do another interview in his clothes, no less. Sweating my way through a New York summer. Artist, writer, performer, just directing.
Badly, yeah.
It's something, but as it's pertinent to us, game designer of recently winning Most Innovative 2018 for Feast, Sharang Biswas. Thank you for joining me and once again letting me sweat in your apartment.
I am excited. And like I said, you're wearing my worst shirt, so it's totally fine.
This is good. So let's start with the most recent news. As of filming, Gen Con was this past week, and Feast not only won Most Innovative, but was nominated for Game of the Year.
Yeah, so
How's
this
it
is...
feel?
I mean, so this is the Indie Grand Breaker Awards that IGDN does, right? And I submitted there was a submission process a couple of months ago, and it was a relatively simple process. You send them the game, you send them a little bit of details. You don't have to write like a 10-page dissertation about anything. You just do it. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I did it. And I was like, whatever. My philosophy has always been just apply to a lot of things, because if you don't apply, you're never going to get anything, right? And I wasn't expecting to win this at all. And then I was in Long Beach, California for a business trip, and it was the night before a presentation, and my colleague, she was sitting next to me in my hotel room, and we were both just working, and I get a Facebook message from my friend Lucian, and he was like, Sharang, he's also a game designer, and he's like, Sharang, did you check the IGN nominations? And my first thought was he got nominated, right? Because his new game has been getting a lot of success recently. It's a cool game. It's called Dead Friend. You should look it up. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm finally managed to navigate myself. It had just been announced, so Google hadn't compiled it yet. It was hard to even get to that page. And I'm like, what the hell? I want to go to this thing. And then I saw that, and I saw Most Innovative, and then Game of the Year, and I literally physically screamed, and my coworker Juliana jumped, and she's like, is everything okay? Because like 2 seconds ago I'd been on Twitter, and I was like talking about some political thing, right? And so she thought something horrible had just happened.
But you were just getting hated on by
and she's like, what happened? And I'm like, oh my God, I showed her. And she's like, what? And then she immediately, without telling me, emails out to the whole firm being like, guess who just got nominated for Game of the Year and Most Innovative? And funny thing is, my firm's consulting so I work with the Medici Group, and our focus is on innovation.
Right.
So it was really funny when she's like, and guess which award? Innovative. And that was really funny. And that was pretty awesome. I felt really good. My presentation next day went really well.
I'm sure.
Because I was like super energized. I'm like, oh yeah, hey everyone.
You're running on this like victory high.
Yeah, basically. It was super fun. So that was really exciting. And then I knew like the awards were very soon, so people were like, are you gonna get a Gen Con? I'm like, it's 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get a hotel. I'm like, what are you talking about? I can't just go to Indianapolis now. Also, it's in the middle of the week. The award ceremony is on like a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I have a good leave policy, but I have to like tell them more than 2 weeks notice unless it's something like serious. Like they're happy that I won, but they'll be like, do you really have to go? Right? So my co-designer who I designed Mad Science Foundation with, Max, who has been with me since the start of my game design journey, he was there because he works for a game publisher and a game lab. So he was there. So I'm like, hey Max, can you accept my award if I happen to win? And he's like, sure, write me something. I'm like, okay. And so it was Wednesday night, and I knew the awards were that night. I was excited.
Right.
And to be fair, like when I won Indiecade, I was really surprised.
Right. So because this is the second.
So that's the thing. So this time I was like excited, but I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm never gonna win, because I'd only won Indiecade. So that was like, wow, this game has stuff. And then it got picked up by the ICA, and I'm like, oh, this game has stuff. So I was excited. And it was like family dinner because my husband was here and my brother-in-law, so my husband's sister's husband, was here, and we were having dinner, and I remembered right before dinner this was going to happen, but I didn't know when they were going to be announced exactly. And then I get a text to take my phone out.
Refreshing your phone. Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm like, I get a text, oh, that might be Max. Let's see what happened. And he photographed the award and sent it to me, and I'm like, ah!
Oh my God.
And then immediately I started getting text,
Right,
tweet,
right.
tweet, Facebook, notification, and people like, congratulations, ah! So that was really cool. I was really excited. I'm actually glad that Bluebeard's Bride won Game of the Year, because Bluebeard's Bride is one of my 2 favorite role-playing games right now. So I'm super glad I was like, wait, I'm nominated in the same category as Bluebeard's Bride? Like, what?
Look, it's an honor to be nominated.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm really happy they won Game of the Year, and I'm really happy I won Most Innovative.
Yeah.
I mean, not being unhumble for a moment, I do think my game is a little innovative. So I think it's a well-deserved award, and I think whoever won, so Bluebeard's Bride that won Game of the Year is very well-deserved.
So let's talk about Feast. For anyone watching who maybe doesn't know what it is, give us kind of a brief overview.
Yeah,
of
so I wrote Feast for, initially, my first version of Feast, so this is not the current version of Feast, I wrote it for the 200-word role-playing game contest. So my friend Jason Cox, he is a professor of art and education, and he's a big game designer. And he had posted on Facebook, 200-word RPG contest. This was last year, and I hadn't heard of it until then. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And so I wrote, I made this game. I did a quick playtest over the phone with another game design friend of mine, Cleo Davis. And I'm like, great. I submitted it to that contest. And when I was thinking about it, so one thing, there's a quote by one of the luminaries in game design. I don't remember which luminary it is anymore.
A luminary.
It's one of the luminaries, right? Which is like, there are hundreds of thousands of verbs in the English language, but when we make game, we tend to focus on like 3 of them, like jump and kill and like decapitate, you know?
Right,
Those are what we focus on.
What Mortal Kombat was just built off of.
Right, jump, decapitate, and kill. Exactly. Sometimes they don't always die and decapitate. That's really both verbs. So I, for this game, really wanted to do, that was my first thing, right? I'm like, I want to make a game based on a different verb. And so I'm like, well, what verbs do I like that would be interesting to make a game in? Oh, having sex. That's one verb. That's cool. Eating. That's another verb. I went to lizard brain. You can see that straight away. I went to lizard brain. And I'm like, okay, let me do something about eating. And I was thinking that, I'm like, well, and my philosophy when I teach game design, I always talk about, I've given talks on this at a number of places, about like using bodily actions, using the game mechanics to represent the theme and the story and content and all those things in the game, not just the mechanics are separate from the theme or from the skinning and stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, what does eating make me think of? And I was thinking in grad school, I encountered a piece of art called, it's called Untitled, but it's subtitled Portrait of Ross in LA, in which case I'm like, well, it is not untitled. It's called Portrait of Ross in LA. But, the artist wants that. And that's a piece which is a pile of candy on the ground. There's a big pile of candy. Okay. When you go to it, it is Gonzalez Torres' intention that you can pick up and eat the candy. So when a docent takes you through a tour and that's there, they will tell you, feel free to take the candy, unwrap it, and eat it. You eat it, and you're told that every night the museum or gallery or whoever's showing it will refill that pile of candy to a particular exact weight. And that weight is the weight of Gonzalez Torres' boyfriend when he got admitted into hospital for AIDS-related complications. And you eating the candy is akin to the disease eating away at his boyfriend, who got thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and died. Wow. So the diminishing rate of the candy being consumed by you is you being this disease. Right? And so when I was thinking,
counteracts the sweetness of the candy.
Right? And so that's a bizarre sort of thing. Like, I'm eating this candy, enjoying it, and I'm listening it, and then I'm like, what the hell am I eating? Right? And so when I was thinking of like food and like what can the act of eating mean, that came to me, right? And I was thinking of that, And I'm like, that's interesting because that's a couple of different things going on there. Chiefly being this, who am I doing this consumption? Like, can I derive pleasure when this food represents something awful? Which, you know, in the modern world, we do a lot. Like, most people are distanced from meat, right? They don't know how meat is made. And in fact, a lot of people are like, I will not eat something that I just saw killed. That's disgusting, but I will take it out of the can or whatever, right? So like we do that. And so that got me thinking. And then I started working on this game, and what interested me as I was making it, and it's very simple, the rules are very simple, is this idea of, so I'll explain the rules. Yeah. So the game is up to 5 players. Initially, I said it's a game for 5 players, but I tested it, and you can play with fewer than 5 players. Okay. Every person cooks and brings one dish, right? And each person is assigned one of the 5 primary tastes. That's sweet, sour, salty, umami, and bitter. So, you know, if you're assigned bitter, you might bring coffee.
Right.
Or grapefruit juice or something. If you're assigned sweet or salty, that's the easiest. If you're assigned umami, you have to then be careful. Are people vegan? Yeah. Because if they're vegan, then you have to stick with like tomatoes, things like that, right? Okay. So I have to do that. When
in this first stages, the assigning the meals, do you suggest that people either know they're playing or know the rules?
Yeah, so I will, because it can be a heavy game, and I'm not gonna be like, hey, surprise, you're playing a really heavy emotional game right now. Like, that's not okay. So everyone cooks a dish and bring it. I didn't tell them, I'm like, we're gonna play a role-playing game, this is the theme, cook something and bring it. And they're like, great. That was when I first tested it. And so they bring it, and then the first thing you do is each of you make a character, just quick one sentence inspired by something you see on the table, right? One of the pieces of food, right? So if someone brought, let's say, whole grapefruit that you're going to eat as bitter, and it's a brunch. One of the good things about this game is whenever I play tested it, it's over brunch, so it becomes a activity that you do while playing the game. My friend Max, one who accepted the award for me, the second time, the first time was my editor who accepted the award for me, he said, he's like, Sharang, you've started doing this genre of game that you do while doing other things, which I've made other games like that as well. So anyway, over brunch, if I see grapefruit, I might look at that and I might be like, oh, grapefruit. Okay, I might be like, the character I'm thinking of is a grapefruit farmer. Or I might see that it's pink. Oh, the character I'm thinking of is a little girl who likes princesses. Or I might be very abstract and be like, oh, because it's all internal, right? It's like, oh, that's a grapefruit. Oh, you know who liked grapefruit? My mom liked grapefruit. Oh, my mom used to be a seamstress. The character I'm thinking of is a professional seamstress. Okay. And you don't have to explain why. That's yours, right? We each have a character. Then you are not playing those characters. You are playing alien parasites that have infected those characters and are slowly draining them of memory and thought until there's nothing left but an empty husk of themselves. So you are playing the alien or a ghost or a demon, but I often just explain alien when I'm demoing the game because I'm not going to...
siphoning.
Right? Something that, something, and when I'm demoing, I just say alien because it's easy to grasp. So then what you do is each round, you take one of the food items and you eat it. Then based on the flavors, textures, and mouthfeel that you experience are the exact same flavors, textures, and mouthfeel that the alien is experiencing as it consumes a memory. So you eat this food, and then based on the taste, this is the bitter food, so that has a prompt. Based on the round it is, so every round there's a different prompt. And then based on what you experience, you describe the memory that you are consuming from the character you named. And you keep playing this until you have eaten each food once, and that will be the end. Everyone's done that. That will be the end of the game. And then the last piece of food you eat describes the final thought or memory that the person thinks about before their personality is forever extinguished, right? And so as I was making the game, a couple of things interested me because the inspiration was this like art piece and food. Right. But as I was making the game, I was like, oh, this is interesting because I really like the idea of, so you're like creating this character but you only fully understand and know as much as you possibly can about the character when you have completely destroyed the character. So through this act of destroying the character, do you finally know who they are? And it is very literally, you are consuming the food, you are eating them slowly. So that is something that really interested me. And as I was making the game, it's hard to, when you're making art to think about which stage of the creation did this thought come in. But I was also thinking of, the whole idea of, eating the madeleine, right? That brings back your childhood memories. That was somehow wrapped up in there, like you can eat something that's familiar, or you smell something that's familiar, and that brings back memories.
Right.
So this idea of memory and food was super connected. This idea of consuming someone and killing them was connected. And that's the game. And I've played it in usually the game tends to be very heavy because it tells me about this person is being eaten.
Right,
and
slowly disappearing.
Right. Sometimes I've played never the full game. Whenever I demo 1 or 2 rounds with people because otherwise, you're never gonna get through things, right? So when I've demoed it at 2 different indiecades. I've demoed it at I don't remember where else I've done it. A couple of classes I've taught with it when I've taught about narrative design. I've taught at different universities. When I've demoed it at indie kids, sometimes they're young kids, and they will not always, but often they pick a fun, more frivolous lighthearted. So one person I'm a Care Bear, I think one person picked, right? And that it worked. The cool thing about this game is there's no tone, there's no universe. It's
you
not
can kind of get it to adapt.
Right, so you can be playing a widower who is really depressed about their husband or something, while you can be playing a sorceress in the same game. It doesn't matter. Right? And so I've often played when younger kids will play this light levity sort of character, but I've never played a full game with the young kids. I'm very interested to see if that levity will stay. Yeah. Or if that levity vanishes.
So it never gets to the point of the final.
With the young, I've never played with the young kids. I play with older people, and it tends to be somewhat morose or bittersweet, or acceptance, but still there's some bittersweetness. And of course, as most art pieces, different people get different things out of it. So the judge one of the judges for the Twinwood RPG contest, which I got special, what's it called? Special naming, runner-up, something like that. One of the judges, she said to her, this is a game about colonialism, right? Which was not my initial intention, right? My intention was all about food and memory. But for her, she was like, this seems like colonialism, where you are taking something someone else has made. I mean, you can also take the thing you made, but you're taking something, you are literally consuming it, and then you are reinterpreting it and saying it outwards. So you are destroying something, and you are then putting your own spin on it and then saying it, which is what colonial appropriation is about. And that was fascinating to me to read that, because that is not my intention with the art piece at all. But of course, that is art, right? Who is the author, right? Once it's out there, it's open to interpretation.
If you can explain it,
right? And if it means something to someone, I'm not gonna be like, you're wrong. You had this profound experience about this idea of colonialism, but actually you're wrong. It's not about. That's what the hell is that, right? So that it was really interesting. That was really interesting to me because that showed me that that's really cool that my game has this layer of meaning to other people that I didn't even intend. And then when it got picked up by the Institute of Contemporary Art, it was for an exhibition called Tag, Proposals on Queer Play and the Way Forward. And Nayland, the curator, or one of the 2 curators, or the main curator, I think, he was interested in queerness represented through art. So for him, the game spoke a lot about queerness and identity. And I can see that a bit more because I'm like, it is about identity. So again, that he had that vision onto the game, which I thought was awesome. Yeah. I mean, apart from the fact that it's awesome that it got in the exhibition, that's cool too. It was cool to me that there was another read on the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's what's interesting about RPGs in total, but especially with something like Feast, is that you could, even if you just change one player of the 5, it could be a very different game.
Right? Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah, and And like, this is not a game. This is not like a crunchy, mechanics heavy game. So the mechanic is eating, and the food will be different each time, and storytelling. And even if it's the exact same people, you're not going to always be in the same mood to tell the same stories. You're not going to have the same memories and so on. So the one interesting thing is I've seen people play the game very differently, right? So when I play the game, I will take a piece of food and I will be very intentional and try and pay attention to what I'm eating in ways I don't normally do. Like I will eat the food and I'll be like, okay, and I will orate like, it is very sweet initially, but I can sense bitterness. The texture is very spongy. There's a little annoying sprinkle bit that catches in my teeth. Oh, it's stuck to the roof of my mouth. That's yucky. And then I will voice those because that helps me think about, well, what are these sensations suggesting to me as a story? Because the game recommends that you use the flavorant of the food to think of what the memory.
Well, as you're talking that through, verbs are coming out. And as the verbs come out, you can take those into a different
way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just one, like I eat it and I'm like, oh, leathery, ooh, leather. And I did this once when I was playing it. It was like dried apricots.
Yeah.
And it was leathery. And so my character was a BDSM prostitute, right? We talk about this. It tends to be characters I play and stuff a lot. Anyway, because I know about that a little bit. Take what you will out of that.
It's gotta be a link somewhere below. No, okay.
And so that was that one thing. But other people who don't like voicing it, and they don't. So I was thinking with my friend Eric Merstman, who's another game designer, and so I very directly was like, this is leathery. That makes me think of leather. Ooh, that makes me think of leather, He, on the other hand, was more free association, right? Okay. He was eating it, he's like, what thought came into my head when I started eating this? It is in some ways informed by this food because I got this sensation, and then that qualia was qualis, I don't know the singular of that, was like playing around my head, and some thought came in, and that's going to be the memory. So that was interesting how different people played it differently. Because if we will eat and think and sense differently, and think of narrative differently, so
we even taste things. There'd be people who find cilantro soapy versus
exactly
that different.
And like certain things, like because you don't always plan what everyone's bringing. Sometimes you do, depending on your group. Sometimes it's just haze and food allergies. Nope, great.
Right. And then you get that one asshole who brings napkins and that's it.
But then the thing, so you might. So I think when we were playing, I brought something that I like a lot, and then one person in the group hated that. They still ate it, and they're like. And then that informed the story. I don't remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure I remember them being like, that's yucky. Okay, well, let me tell you. And that was funny.
So with a game like this, when you approach it, because you said this was part of a contest initially, do you take the same approach to the other games you've worked on? Like, is it the same approach every time you're starting a new game, or is each one a little bit different?
So, okay, well, one thing, until recently, I did a lot of design for contests. And like, it's a great, if you're a starting artist of any sort, a great plan to get you to actually do and then finish your art, because everyone knows if you're an artist, often you're like, oh, I made, and then never finish it, right?
Is to eat things.
You have lots of things to deal with. Life happens. Your husband happens. It's great to be like, there is a submission deadline, a contest or a conference or something. I will make a new game for this thing, and it's easy. I'll be like, oh, I'll just submit my old game. No, submit a new game. Unless you really think, oh, my old game really fits this, right? So, for example, the Denny Gallery, I was approached by two independent curators, Sheetal Prajapati and Anna Harshanyi, and they were like, oh, we're doing this exhibition, we'd like you to make a game, the theme is language, it's 1 month away. I'm like, great. Later, I learned that they were under the impression that I was going to submit a game I had made already about language. My thing was, I have 1 month to make a game.
Make this happen.
Max, make this together. Let's do it. Right? And we did. And it worked. And it was pretty successful. So I always say, if you can, look for conferences, look for contests, look for event, and then make them. I keep doing this, and hey, I got lucky a few times, right? And sometimes I'm not lucky. I've done a lot of this. Like I submit to the one-page dungeon contest every single year. Most years. And I've never won, but I've always made something,
right?
You know, and I have a finished product. And
but
that's
even
cool.
when you don't win, that's practice.
You have made something. And again, I didn't win the 200-word RPG contest, but the same game ended up winning 2 other awards, right? So anyway, I did that, and I found that's a good way to work. And it depends on the thing. Like, I think it's, like, recently I've started doing that more because Feast was successful. I'm like, let me think in that way more. Like, think of the verb, blah, 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 right? So right after Feast, this year I made another game, food related, because I want to do more food related games, where the main action you do is prepare salad.
Right.
You play the game while making salad. Yeah, it's called Verger. And you play the game while preparing salad and then screaming into the ether in an empty kitchen. And then the next game, for this year, 200-word RPG, I'm like, okay, well, let me, my thought was, last year I was like, sex or food. Let me do sex this year. So the game I'm currently working on, the new draft, is a game where the main game mechanic is taking clothes off. Right? Wow. Which is a symbolic act of both sexuality and vulnerability simultaneously, right? And the game plays with that. And so I've been doing that now, but then not always. So for example, I was asked to contribute a game to an anthology of 2-player role-playing games.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I want to do a game about Wizard School. Because I just come back from New World Magiscola, which is a really fun 3-4 day long LARP about Wizard University.
Right.
And I don't think I just come back, but I'd come back recently. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I want to make a 2-player RPG about Wizard School, but I want to make it about burning out at university, right? I'll make it about you have too many things to juggle, and how do you juggle everything?
It's Hermione very hard. In real life. That's
right? Time turner, right? Yeah, so I'll make a game of that, and then I'm like, well, okay, then I want this game to be about juggling lots of things. How do I model that mechanically? Because like I said, I want to, I like the message to be modeled by the, right? Marshall McLuhan, right? Meaning media is the message, right?
Yeah.
Medium is the message. So I went that opposite approach there. When I did Mad Science Foundation, that was another contest, but Max had a game mechanic. He's like, this is an underutilized game mechanic. I Cut, You Choose is an underutilized game mechanic. What can we do with that? And I'm like, okay, well, I Cut, You Choose makes me think of a couple of things. It makes me think of archaeologists and countries trying to decide on what art piece the country gets versus what art piece the archaeologist takes back to their own country. That was my first thought. And I really wanted to make this game about archaeology because I'm really into ancient history.
Oh, man.
But then as we were playing it, Max like, no, I'm going to have the idea of something else. And I'm like, I don't know who came up with the idea. I think we simultaneously did. But we're like, what about grant money, right? We have been to university. We did research. We know about academia and grant money. And so what if it's a game about getting funding? And then we're like, well, that sounds awful for people, right? It would probably be a really fun game for indie gamers. Like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a quirky game. But we're like, but only for indie gamers, right? We want this to have bigger appeal. So we're like, well, what if it's mad science funding? So in that case, we started with this very technical thing, right? With this I Cut, You Choose game mechanic. And then we built it up. But then with Feast, it wasn't such a technical mechanic. It was a more floofy mechanic. Not that floofy is a bad thing.
But it's not like rolling dice or something.
Exactly. It wasn't like Max, like, you know what, it's like there will be a decision where the person divides something into two and then the other person has to pick the first thing. That is a very technical interaction.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, eating, that's my mechanic. What is eating gonna conjure up?
I guess you can kind of put mechanics in two different, there's the like A equals B and then A equals multiple possibilities.
Right. And again, of course, I was making a different kind of game, right? I'm making a storytelling game and I knew that. I was making a role-playing game.
Right.
And I knew I was making a storytelling role-playing game because I'm not, in a 200-word RPG contest, you're not going to make a 7th Sea the game, right? You have 200 bloody words, right? But with Hexed, which is the Wizard University game, it's a game where it is a one-off game. You are playing a freshman at Wizard University and you have 3 days to finish your midterm and you have not started. Go finish your midterm. But you also have to socialize with people. And you also have to sleep. And those are the three things: either sleep, social life, or university, which is what people say is the triangle of university life, right? So that was my first idea. Was it's a game about balancing, juggling, university. Now, what mechanic matches that? And then I was inspired by
it borders on like resource management, almost.
sort of, yeah. So you manage dice. So I was inspired by a game by 1-7 Design by John Harper called Lady Blackbird. It is a wonderful free role-playing game. You can find it online. It is wonderful. And that they have this interesting dice mechanics. I used that and I like adapted it sort of, and I'm like, this works because there's a dice pool that you spend. And Monty Cook's games and Cypher system has made me think more about spendable statistics, because when you think of role-playing games traditionally, which is D&D and its derivatives and things that were inspired by it, you often think of this is your statistic and you roll based on that. But
it's a stable stat.
Right. It might change, but it usually increases. Right? But in the Cypher system, you spend your strength to do things. You spend your intellect to do things. And that is interesting. And that sat well with this idea of burning out in college. Right. You're spending your like energy and spoons and stuff. And then combined with the dice mechanic that Lady Blackbird has and a couple of things that... So I guess I've designed in different ways. There was also, for example, there was a game that I'm working on now. It's going to be published in, well, it's been accepted. Hopefully it will be published in Worlds Without Master, which is Epidia Ravical's magazine. That started because we were doing a contest where we had to use an existing board game that was going to come out, use only the components in there to make a different game. Right? My friend, game design friend Brendan Trombley and I started working on that. We submitted our game, which was a role-playing game rather than a board game. It didn't win, but then we liked our game, so we continued with it. And then at one point we decided, well, we don't need those components, so we took those out, and then the game changed drastically. Yeah. So that was a game that started with components, which is interesting. Like, what can we do with these components? And then it changed a lot, and we like where it is now. Awesome. So there were different ways of doing it. Yeah, sorry for that weird answer.
No, but I mean it's for anyone who's interested in getting into it. It sounds like different results require different ways to start, right?
Yeah.
You can't apply the same principle of game design for every single one. You'll find inspiration.
Yeah, and it's not even like different things work for different people, because I'm a firm believer in growth mindset where you can become good at things and not you are inbuilt good at this thing. Right. Obviously, yes, if you are allergic to lactose, you'll never win the milk drinking contest, right? Well, you might with pills.
Yeah.
Even then, right?
These days.
So I'm not even like, oh, for this person, this is the method that works. No, like for different projects, different methods work, different source of inspiration, And like when I make games with Max, they tend to be more technical, right, because he is very good at game mechanics. He is very strong at thinking through game mechanics and stuff. When I make games on my own, they can be technical, but they're less often technical.
Right.
In that way. So
that's awesome. So how'd you get to this point? How'd you decide that you wanted to start doing game design? And really, I mean, it sounds like you started with all these contests and stuff. Like, yeah, where did you always kind of feel like this is where you wanted to go? Did you stumble into this?
So the funny thing, which this is ridiculous, but I only thought of this in the last few years, that I'd actually been game designing from like primary school, right? But I just never considered that. So I would do a lot of, I remember I started doing this on the bus home from school, because my bus trip was an hour long, ish. And my friend Tejas, who I'm still friends with, which is great. He's in Texas now. I'm still friends with him. We hang out when he visits. And he plays board games. But third grade Sharang, I would make up like storytelling games, because we were both into fantasy, sci-fi, kids stuff. So, and like Pokemon and things, and like, X-Men had come out recently, the movie, and we were into that, 4th grade or 5th grade. But I'd be like, okay, so you're a wizard, and you're walking in the woods, and you see a werewolf. What'd you do? He's like, I point my staff, and I'm like, you point your staff, and it was super subjective, right? I'd be like, if I was in a good mood, I'm like, yeah, you burn it. But if I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, no,
it's when kids are playing make-believe is no, right? I shot you first.
Right? No, but I kept doing that, and then I did it with more, like in the playground, like 3 of my friends were like, okay, so you're the wizard, you're the thing, and I was really mean. I had a friend, Gaurav, who was a great guy, but I was really mean to him as a kid, and I'd be like, I'm the one that, yeah, it kills you! And it was always him. I'm like, I didn't kill you. And he was always like, oh no. and I was awful to him.
But it's like early DMing. This is
yes, that's the thing. So I started doing that, and then 8th or 9th grade. So remember, I grew up in the United Arab Emirates, where like D&D and magic stuff don't really exist, partially because of the stigma against witchcraft.
Right.
Right. It's a Muslim country, and so a friend of mine had moved to another country, and he'd brought 3rd edition D&D. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of this, like vaguely. And I'd heard of it because of video games. Because Tejas, same friend, had bought Neverwinter Nights.
Oh boy.
And so we played that, and I'm like, oh, it's based on Dungeons and Dragons. What? And I'd heard of that, and then, and honestly, this was really weird. I once on the internet, I just randomly searched wizards.com. I'm like, well, I wonder what that was. I stumbled into Wizards D&D, and I'm like, what? It's just amazing story, but that's literally what it did. I'm like, oh, I'm into Wizards. Let me see if there's a wizards.com. There was.
Right.
And that's how, and then so D&D, and so we tried to play and never did, but I'd always thought about it. I'm like, I really want to play. Right. And then I went to undergrad, and I was very close with one of the nerdy fraternities. I was in one of the nerdy co-ed frats. And our rival co-ed frat, hosted this game event every quarter called Dartmouth Con, right?
Okay.
And I went, and I'm like, oh, there are all these board games that aren't like Monopoly, right? Because even at that time, I'm like, I don't like Monopoly. It's a terrible game. I just played it because the only thing you knew, Ludo and Cluedo and Monopoly and like terrible things like that, right?
The Cranium, which everyone
which wasn't a thing outside the U.S.
Really?
Yeah. Not really big outside the US.
That's fine, because I hate Cranium.
Right, like Pictionary and things, right? Yeah. So I started playing them, and then Mary Flanagan, preeminent game designer, had just arrived at Dartmouth that previous year or something and was starting a game design class. And my philosophy in undergrad, I have 2 degrees in biomedical engineering, right? Was I will take 2 engineering, I was 3 classes a quarter, 2 engineering classes, and then 1 other class that I will find fun, whatever. So I'm like, that's fun. And Dartmouth is a liberal arts school, so it's easy to do that, even as an engineer. So I took this game design class and really liked it, and then I interned at the lab, and I just kept going that way. And then after my second engineering degree, I'm like, I don't want to keep doing engineering. And so I went to art school. So I went to Tisch, and I went to their interactive telecommunications program, which I was like, what the hell's that? It's ITP, it's like a hybrid art, design, and technology program. And there I took another game design class with Greg Treffry, I always get his name wrong, who is a game designer in New York City. Okay. He has a company, Gigantic Mechanic, he's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, I used to game design at Dartmouth, and I'm decent at it. And I remember consciously not applying to a master's in game design, because I'm like, I want to go to a flexible program where I can do a lot of different things. I was at that time like, I don't know what I want to do.
You weren't kind of like locked in. You enjoyed it, but you weren't locked.
Yeah, like even now, I would not say I'm just a game designer. Like you introduced me as all this random stuff, right? Because I like doing a lot of things, and I feel bored just doing one thing all the time. And that's also why people, it's really funny because I'm in the board game world and the LARP world and the tabletop RPG world and the video game world, which are honestly pretty siloed worlds.
Yeah.
Like the LARP people are like, oh my god, we're the coolest because we're like snooty and wonderful and we're Scandinavian. And the tabletop people are like, oh my god, the LARP people are so ridiculous and running around. And the board game people are like, ew, no, give me strategy. Right. Nothing subjective. And the video games are like, those aren't real games. The only real games are video games.
Right. And then you get your console players.
Right. And the console players. I could never afford a console when I was a kid, and so I never did. And then I'm like, well, I have a computer. It does a lot of different things, including video games. I'm just going to play computer games, right? Also, I don't have enough finger dexterity to play console games. But, growth mindset, I can develop it, but do I really want to? No.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I was in grad school, and I started doing some game design, and I did a lot of interactive theater, so I've mounted 5 interactive theater things, but that was always informed by my game design, right? Okay. Like game design, interactive theater, my keynote talk at Living Games was about how all these different fields have a lot to learn from each other, right? And then after graduation, I was like, well, I'm going to be a freelancer, so I started doing I started getting a lot of game design teaching gigs, and I was doing game design because I wanted to, and then I kind of fell into that. So now I still write, I'm still a published writer, I still keep publishing, I still do game design, I still do interactive theater, Like I have a show-ish thing coming up in November. Yeah. And I do that. And then at one point I realized that, you know what's really also important in life? Health insurance. And, you know, I'd been a freelancer for 2 years. I'm like, I'd never done a full-time job before apart from small internships. Like I interned at the Met Museum. I was their first and only game design intern.
Wow.
And so I'm like, well, I want to try a full-time job, but I only want to do a job that I would like doing. Like I have 2 engineering degrees. I could do engineering, but I don't want to. And so the consulting gig with the Medici Group, I'm the experience designer. And I'm like, okay, so that's using similar muscles as game design, but it's also not full-time game design, which might be a good thing. You know, sometimes if you work too much on the thing you like, you get tired of it.
Well, if you're doing it for another company and then doing it on the side,
that can get much, right?
You can't step away from it, refresh your brain.
Right?
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Medici Group's mission is very good. It's about spreading diversity. Like, the mission is about diversity. We work with firms for diversity. And so I'm like, great, I want to do that. But the Medici Group, when they interviewed me, Christian, one of the partners, made it very clear that they were hiring me because I have game design experience. Because he's like, we want a different way to look at corporate training, and game design is a different way of looking at that, which is why I want to hire you. So we want you to use it. And the Medici Group's philosophy is that they encourage employees to cultivate their outside passions, because the idea is that all sides of you as a human can affect all other sides, right? So my game design is going to be made better by me doing corporate training. My corporate training is better by me doing game design. My cooking is going to be better by me, I don't know, having a triathlete husband, right? And so that is really cool that even with my firm, I get to still continue game design. I do a lot of that. I exercise similar muscles, like I said. They're supportive of that. So I have a very busy schedule that I do my 9 to 5, 6. And then I come home, and often I'm like, okay, now I have to design. And again, deadline is so helpful, right? So I'm working on Dungeons and Dragons module right now with a collective, and we have deadlines.
That's awesome.
So I'm like I have a meeting this weekend, and I'm a little behind. So I need to like get on that and like work on that. So.
But it's the accountability that helps.
It always, right?
For sure.
So Verger was, I think, one of the few games I made without like a contest or anything. I'm just like, I want to make another food game. But last one was about eating food. This was about preparing the food.
Right.
And then I made it, and I'm like, great. And then it got picked up by an exhibition. It was at Pixel Pop's. Pixel Pop in St. Louis had an exhibition called Rules to Play By, which is art pieces that involve rules. That's the minute it got picked up. I'm like, yay.
It's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
So you bring up the Medici's aim towards working towards diversity and everything.
Yeah.
Now that you've been to a couple of these events, you've done some game design, both in like I'd say both kind of on the indie side was things like Feast as well as like Mad Science.
Yeah, which is less indie. Yeah.
Right. Do you see with this industry things moving more towards a diverse crowd, both audience and as well as people making the games?
Yeah.
Is there still a lot of room for that to go?
I mean, okay, there's definitely room for that to go, right? I mean, you see every day there's like the whole ArenaNet fiasco, and that's not even like complicated diversity. That's like women, right? It's not like, oh, we are now in 21st century having a complex discussion about trans people, blah, blah, blah. No, it's just about like women. Like, we've been disrespecting women for millennia, right?
Yeah.
My God, seriously. Anyway, but I think, things are happening more because people, marginalized people are doing more to like, not doing more, they've always been doing things, but they've been doing more in terms of fighting for their voice to be heard.
And I think they're getting recognized more by the people who've been in power previously.
Yeah, but I think that's because they're making the noise, right?
Yes.
You can't, like, I've spoken to Larry Kramer, right? He was a fellow at Dartmouth once, and he's always like, you know what? Sometimes you have to make the noise. The people in power, often they're oblivious, and even if they are, it behooves them to stay in power, right? So you have to make a lot of noise for them to notice you. And there are a lot of good things that like Tanya Killmonger and well, that's not her real name. Tanya DePass is doing things. I Need Diverse Gaming. There are all these like the Game Devs of Color Expo is amazing. Not just because I spoke in it, but it literally it was a really cool conference where the organizers were incredibly intentional about a lot of decisions. Like all speakers got paid, which does not happen at game conventions. Yeah, GDC, Game Developers Conference, biggest gaming event in the world, no one gets paid, right? No one gets paid, but you pay hundreds of dollars for a ticket. Game Devs of Color Expo, they made a commitment, we're going to pay our speakers. It will maybe small, but we're going to pay our speakers.
That's amazing.
Right? Really they made a commitment to have women and people of color as speakers. They made a commitment, we're going to have big studios, we're going to have indie studios, we're even going to have student games showcased, right? So that was an amazing thing. And so like these initiatives that marginalized communities are doing, I think are what's driving things, right? And that, of course, is then creating hubbub, and then other people are like, the more dumb people are like, oh, these exist. And then allies are like, yes, let's advocate for these things.
Right.
But I don't like this when people are like, oh yeah, but like that's because people are noticing you. I'm like, they're not the ones to get the credit.
That's absolutely
right.
Yeah.
But I do think it's getting better. For example, when I worked at Tilt Factor Lab with Mary Flanagan and Max, Tilt Factor Lab's mission is about social justice-y things through games. And they have really interesting research and wonderful stuff they do. So when Max and I made Mad Science, and then decided we're going to pitch it, we were trained that way. That's how we learned game design, through Mary Flanagan. And so we're like, okay, when we pitch a game called Mad Science Foundation, which, by the way, was always the title. Like, we thought the publisher would change the title. They didn't. I'm like,
great.
Oh, okay.
Keep it intact.
Yeah. We think it's, when I say mad scientist, and this is shown through research, it's very easy for the first thing you think of is an old white man with a long beard, right? Most people who say that thought the first thing they think of are lying, right? I think of that, right? Just like I am a married gay man. If you tell me a loving couple, the first thing I think of will be a heterosexual couple, which is sad.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are these biases in society, right? So we said, okay, well, we want to change that. So when we were negotiating with Cryptozoic, we said we would like there to be a clause in the contract that you are going to try and make representations of scientists who are gender diverse and race diverse and age diverse.
We got this here, and I think that's a good example right there. So it is one of the first things you notice is you don't have the old Mega Man Dr. Wily type character right there on the front.
And we told Cryptozoic, like, this is what we want. We would like this to be in the contract. And they were amazing about it. They were like, yeah. And, you know, they're a publisher. The contract doesn't say we have any say in the art, right? The contract only said we will take that into account, the diversity thing. But when they made their art, they sent it to us and said, what do you think? Do you like this? And that was really great of them.
That's awesome.
Had if you want to publish with a board game company, Cryptozoic is really good to work with. And it was really cool because when they took me to Gen Con to promote the game and stuff, I brought my lab. It was really funny. I brought my lab coat and goggles. I am a double bioengineer. I have to keep using it. They're my actual lab coat that I did my actual thesis, which is about poop, in. So it has probably got like poop stuff on it at some point. But I wore that on the Gen Con, and someone was like, hey, great Dr. Horrible outfit. And I'm like, it's actually my lab coat. It was hilarious. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Ha ha ha. I'm cooler than you. But so, no comment. But anyway, so when I got to Gen Con, Adam Splendorio, the VP, one of the VPs, he was the person we're working with. He's great. He told us, he's like, this is really cool. We're going to try and do that in all our games from now on. Like, that was a really cool discussion we had. We're going to try and see in every game we make, can we have diverse representations? And like, you know, we have fairy princess little girl with a cannon, right? And we really want, that is actually a suggestion we directly made to them. Like, they were really good about that. We gave them to, I want like a punky person who might be coded queer, to be one of the scientists. We want a gender-neutral brain in a jar. They gave us a brain and a cyborg, which is much better than it could have been. We want a little girl who looks girly, and the artist, Rob Momart, did this like Fairy Princess Little Girl, and we heard that Fairy Princess Little Girl is actually based on his daughter, who likes Fairy Princess stuff, but also likes mechanics. And we're like, that's amazing, because of course you can like mechanics and be a fairy princess little girl, right? Like the most annoying thing someone once told me in college was like, oh, you must be a theater major because you're gay. I'm like, you know that none of the male theater majors are actually gay? Which is really sad because I'm like, what the hell? Also, I'm a biomedical engineering major, so, right? And so that inspired a lot of confidence, right? And that was really exciting. And then the awards at Gen Con this year were really cool, right? Harlem Unbound, which is about Harlem, and is by a black man, I think. I think he's a black man. I do not know how he self-identifies. But
We'll look it up and cut this out of that.
So he is a person of color, and he has won 3 awards. It's really great, right? Bluebeard's Bride is a game made by women about horrible things that happen to women. So not only is it a game about women, it's a game about marginalization of women, right? And that won Game of the Year at the other awards, right? And so those kinds of things make me feel excited. I have heard from some people that like, oh yeah, the tabletop world is much better than the video game world in that regard.
Not surprised.
Right? I have never worked in the video game industry. I've worked in video game journalism.
Right.
So I cannot comment as much, but from what I see, that seems to be the case. Like the tabletop world. And you know what? It could be a function of the fact that, you know, in tabletop games, you sit with people.
Yeah.
And so you are forced to be empathetic. I'm not saying you are forced to be nice, otherwise you can have miserable time, but research shows, I work in the diversity field, right? Research shows that by interacting with people who are different from you, you become more empathetic and your inbuilt biases gradually disappear. Video games, you don't do that as much.
Right.
You do that sometimes, but not as much. And so maybe it's a function of that fact that tabletop gamers are more likely to be better that way. I don't know, wild theory. But
I mean, it makes sense. Do you think that there's also, as a contributing factor, they did a lot of tabletop games, let's take D&D being the most popular as an example, you know, the idea that you can create a character that is so wildly different, the idea of walking a mile in someone else's shoes.
So that's one of the things about LARP, especially the more Nordic style or freeform, American freeform LARP, where there is a lot of research and stuff about like embodying another character does things to you and makes you think differently. And of course, this is not me saying the tabletop world is amazing.
No.
Yeah. There's a lot of marginalization and a lot of women treated badly in the tabletop world, which is pretty sickening.
And like any D&D art from like, you know,
right?
third edition.
Yeah, right? And like a lot of, like I've had stories of people tell me, yeah, like one of my players played D&D with me in grad school, and she told me that she was the only girl at her table, and she was with all these weird guys, and they immediately made her character the like sexual object of everyone else. And because you're playing the girl. A friend of mine shared a thing about a LARP where she was the only woman character, and so some other character had a thing where they had to implant a child in someone, and so she had to get raped. And I'm like, what? So her character had to get raped because that's the only way his character could do this thing. And of course, you're the only woman character, so we have to do this to you. And she's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want my character to be raped. Like, what? And so there is a lot
Shouldn't have to say that.
So yeah. So I'm not saying the tabletop world is amazing.
Of course.
But I have found the tabletop can be pretty decent and you know, good about that. And people I've met often say, yeah, the tabletop world is a little bit better. And the problem with me is I'm a very loud and forceful personality. So my friend in college once showed me I battering ram my way through awkwardness and weirdness. So I might not even notice if someone's being, I don't know, whatever, racist or whatever to me. I'm just like, ah.
Yeah. Don't let them stop you. That's
and like I make a conscious effort when I make narrative sort of stuff. I always put queer people and queer characters in. So I made a game. It's a interactive fiction game, and it's very melodramatic. It's about vampires. I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be a gay romance, of course. And I'm making a new one about queer polyamorous dating. It's like this. It's like the first page of the game. It's this guy's like, oh my god, I have a crush on this guy. He's so hot. I'm gonna tell my girlfriend because she's better with guys than I am. So she can help me wingman me, right? And my philosophy is, so I was talking to a game design friend of mine. He's gay, and he was making a game for a learning company about this about this prince rescuing a princess. I'm like, you know what? You should make a game about a prince rescuing a prince. He's like, no, I don't put gay stuff in all my games. I'm like, yes, you do, because who else is gonna put gay stuff in games? Straight people? No, and not necessarily just because they're mean, though some of them are. Because they want to write from their experience, and it's easier for them to write about straight people because they're, So we have to write about gay people, and there are fewer of us. So we have to write a lot of it for that media to exist. And so that is something I abide by. And I know Queerly Represent Me, this Australian group, did an interview of me, and I'm like, yeah, I like putting queer people in my things that have media. So for example, I commissioned this great artist, MJ Barros, for the art for Hexed, the Wizard University game. Yeah. And I'm like, great. I'm going to commission 3 pieces from you. One is going to be an old Indian lady wearing a sari who is the headmistress of this British university. Second piece is going to be a brown dude with dreadlocks and a ghost dude making out, right? Third piece is going to be a gender non-conforming person fighting a demon. Because I'm very intentionally going to make all the art in this piece not featuring traditionally what is thought of as wizard school people, which is what is thought of in the Harry Potter movies, right? So when Hermione became a black person in the Harry Potter plays, that was pretty awesome. Yeah. And J.K. Rowling was like, well, I actually never said she's white. I said she had bushy hair and big front teeth.
The end. Right, yeah.
So that is something I try in my work. So even in something like Mad Summer doesn't have a story, I'm like, we need gender neutral people. We need a person who is coded queer, gender, sexual, we don't know, but is coded queer and punky. Things like that. And visibly so. So Eric Mersman, who I talked about before, has this great quote that I tweeted once saying, what was it? So it was a response to a tweet that someone was talking about Bucky and Captain America making out or something, right? And then some guy had replied to that tweet saying, why do you have to force gay agenda down everyone's throat? And his avatar was, what's his name?
Red Skull?
No. The superhero, Deadpool.
Okay. Yeah.
Deadpool is famously all sexual. Yeah. He will bang anything that moves, right? So it's super ironic that this guy who has Deadpool as avatar is like, oh my god, queerness, right? And so Eric Mersman tweeted that saying, I don't remember his exact words, he had a really succinct, nice phrase, but he was basically saying, you can't just Dumbledore everything, right? You can't just be like, oh, by the way, he's gay. Right? You have to explicitly talk about that in the fiction, otherwise it isn't enough. You need to represent properly, not just oh, he just happens to be queer after the fact.
Right. It's one thing to tokenize it. It's another thing to actually make it part of.
Right. Right. And it doesn't. My opinion, it doesn't have to. The media doesn't have to explore. Not every piece of media that has a queer person must explore themes of queerness. But if there's an explicit queer person, that is good. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, right? I like the movie a lot. It's fun. And his gay roommate, that's not the main theme of the movie at all. But I'm it's really nice as a gay roommate. Maybe we'll get to a stage where the hero can be gay. But you know what? This is nice.
Right.
Put queer people everywhere. Or put marginalized, not just queer people. I put a lot of queer people everywhere. But put marginalized. I put queer people and Indian people and everything. Right? I love making D&D stuff with half the people that have Indian names and no one can pronounce them. And then it's great because in character they get really upset at you if you can't pronounce their name, especially if they're a dragon.
Fuck yeah, they should.
Right? And that's really fun.
Honestly, it's better than a lot of what the Forgotten Realms does, where I can't pronounce those things. They don't come from anything. At least these have some sort of basis.
And a lot of of course, it started with a white person made chainmail, right? And he drew on stuff he was familiar with, so it makes sense. But now it's a more diverse feel. People all over the world play things like that. People from all kinds of backgrounds play that. It's nice to have other inspirations,
Yeah.
right? So like I get a lot of inspiration from Indic stuff, and of course there's a line, like there's a thing about what is appropriation versus inspiration, and like I was at so Avery Alder, who designed Monster Hearts, right? So she gave a class at NYU recently that I attended. It was a 1-day 8-hour class. It was a really good class, and this conversation came up about where one person's like, oh, yeah, you can, my thing is always take from anything, culture is free and we should be able to draw upon it. And I'm like, you know what? We would like that to be true, but it is very easy for a white person to say that when your culture hasn't been destroyed and systematically wiped out. Native American peoples, for example, were forced into schools and forbidden from speaking their language, and much of their languages are dying out. And that's a huge tragedy, all that, right? If your culture is systematically been erased by colonizers, it feels a bit weird if those same colonizers are then like, oh, let's take your culture and do this fun thing with it, right? I'm not saying you cannot do that. You just have to be very thoughtful about that and preferably work with people of that culture. Right?
So I was going to ask, especially, for myself being a cisgender, straight, white male.
Right.
Like the steps that, we can take to help drive diversity in, the marketplace. And a lot of that just comes from making sure we can at least, if we don't take them into consideration, at least stepping out of the way to give other voices a chance.
I'm not gonna say don't make a game themed on the Mahabharata, right? Mahabharata's one of the world's treasures, literarily. It is a giant epic. There's a lot of cool things that are interesting, that explore the human condition, that would be an awesome fight scene, right? Mahabharata's about a war, right? So I'm not gonna say don't make it a Mahabharata that is rude to people, but be aware that, you know what, for a lot of people consider Mahabharata to be sacred text, right? So be very intentional and thoughtful what you're doing. Do research, read about it. Don't be like, oh, I've heard it's about this, let's make it about that, right?
Right.
And then work with people who are from that culture, to so that you have someone who can tell you what a lived experience of that is, right? Those always be thoughtful, think about how this can affect other people who it portrays, do research about it, don't just be like, oh yeah, I know that Native Americans, they like feathers, let's just put lots of feathers in this game, it becomes Native American, the hell? No. Right? Do research and then work with people from that culture, because you will never know as much about that culture than someone who lived it. You might have a PhD in it, in which case you will know it in a certain way, but if someone who's had a lived experience will know it in a very different way, which is the experience of being marginalized. Right? And yes, we want to get to the stage in the world where all knowledge is free and blah, 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 blah. But that is not the stage it is now. And which is why you need to have thoughtfulness. Yes, maybe a millennium from now, every culture is all equal. But until that is the case, you need to be very thoughtful about that kind of thing. That's why, when I run Bluebeard's Bride, I tell people, hey guys, it's a game about feminist horror. I'm not and have never been female. So this is through my lens. When I took art history in grad school, our professor was like, hey everyone, just so you know, my training is in Western art. So much of most of my work here in this class is going to be Western art. Not because I don't know about not because I don't want to include other things, and I will include other things, but I know less about it.
Right.
So, prefacing things is also
yeah,
nice.
so really the step is just recognizing your place in the world and being able to kind of sit there and say, well, I may not get this right. I'm only coming from my perspective, but knowing that is your perspective.
Yeah, is a big
step.
Big thing. Yeah. And there's a really funny thing about right now, it seems especially literary world, for example, white people are allowed to write about any culture and they're praised oh, look how they stepped into this other culture. But there was this famous case where this Chinese American writer wrote about a black little boy in the South. And then all the critics are but can they really authentically capture this experience? And I'm well, you know that white people write about all this thing all the time, and I'm oh my god, so clever. So
Yeah, calm down, white people.
So yeah, that's interesting.
So what's next for you? So you're working on the.
I always work on more than one project at a time.
So you mentioned the game you're working on involving kind of stripping, using the sex as the part there.
So
what else do you have?
So I just released Verger, so that's released, but that's cool. My plan tentatively is to make 3 games involving food in some way, 3 games involving sexuality in some way. So I have 2 food and 1 sexuality game, and then make an anthology called the Lizard Brain Sextet. So that's like an idea I have. And then release that and get it actually fully made with more artists, maybe kickstart something. I don't know. Yeah. I want to do that. So the 2-player anthology is, I think, the title of the anthology is called, I think it's called You and I Games for 2, something like that. That is coming out soon. My game Hexite is in there, so that'll come out next year, I think. Then I am working on the RPG about myth building and coming of age for Epidemic Rabbit Calls magazine. We don't have a title yet. It is about coming of age. It is a half-an-hour role-playing game. You play with another person. Now, that's another thing. I'm really interested in making role-playing games that are small.
Yeah.
And then I'm working with my friend Dan Scribner to do a game about gods and heroes, where the DM is the hero and all the other players are the gods. And then I'm working on a game about tomb robbing, but you are the priests who are securing the tomb thousands of years ago.
Oh, wow.
And then we see what happens. It's inspired a bit by the skeletons.
So the idea is that it's in the past, you're prepping this tomb so that, millennia from... Oh, wow.
And I have a number of ideas it has a number of directions it could go about, like, lots of different things. And then I'm working on this has taken a little pause. I'm working on a interactive fiction game, like I mentioned before, about a witchy, polyamorous, bisexual dude who's trying to win the heart of this guy he's into with the help of his girlfriend, who's a little annoying. And I'm working on that. I'm working on those. I'm working on, for November, for this exhibition, I'm working on a interactive theater / live game about dystopian hacking, where physical dance is how you hack. Because I've been getting into contra dance recently.
Okay.
Which is really interesting because the contas are called dance. So contra dance, for those who don't know, is like square dancing, but it's New England style. And the caller will call out what your steps are, and you do them. And so that resonated with me. And my co-designer, Nick O'Leary, who's a very talented director, him and I are talking about this idea of, like, often we talk in the discourse about the digital space being, like, dividing you. But contra dance, where you're holding each other and stuff, is very intimate. Mm-hmm. Like, it is uncomfortably intimate sometimes. And so it's fun to like juxtapose this very intimate thing with this, like, digital communication, which is not as intimate. What does that mean? And, like, what does it mean when the digital and the meat space intrude? So we're working on that. We also have a submission to another gallery show for another piece, an active theater piece. So I'm working on a lot of things.
And you find time to sleep and eat?
I mean, I just do them all very slowly. Or like, I'd like work on this for a chunk of time, like a month, and then I pause and work on another thing.
Give your mind a break on the one. You come
so
back.
Like last night, I just sent out to a couple of people a second draft of the stripping game, which the first draft's on the 200. I submitted it this year, so it's there. Okay. It's called Several Miles from Heaven, so you can play the first version of it.
Yeah. We're gonna have a load of links in the description below. It's gonna be great.
But it's funny because that is a game that not everyone will playtest with me, because it is about taking your clothes off in front of someone else. So I have to like find people to, hey, can you playtest it yourselves and just report it to me? Because a lot of people are not going to want me watching them strip, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, I'll only play this with my girlfriend. And I'm like, okay. Like, a friend of mine really liked Feasts. So I'm like, hey, do you want to playtest this? He's like, yeah, I'll playtest it. And he's like, this might take a while because my girlfriend's out of town and this is the only person I'm going to playtest with. And I'm like, that's fine.
Do you from what you've done so far with this game, do you find the experience is different with whether it's with maybe someone, like whether it's with a loved one like that or with just a friend?
So personally, I've only play tested it once, right? I've gone through the number of people. That's why I'm trying to get other people to play test it to give me feedback, because normally I play test a lot. So I played this once with a friend of mine who's like straight, and it was like fun, and he was like, I think I was like, to get him comfortable, I'm like, let's drink some wine. So we had some wine, play test it, and that was like fun, and he got into it. And of course, the game doesn't say you have to get naked.
Right.
The game just says you must remove
just
clothing. So you could be wearing layers, and he wore layers underneath. Like he took it, like the game says, remove clothing from your legs. So he took his shorts off. He was wearing underwear.
So you might get more playtesters in the winter when it's cold.
Right? Maybe. I mean, I just sent out a bunch. I actually got feedback from one playtester already. He actually playtested on his way to an orgy. He's like, yeah, my friend came over. We're going to go. We playtest this first, then went. And I'm like, awesome.
That's perfect. It's like a warm-up.
Yeah. And that's one of the ideas of the game. So Max was like, it's good because he's like, again, this theme of games that you can play while simultaneously doing other things. So you can play Vergil while actually preparing salad to eat later. You have to prepare, and then you have to eat at the end. You can play Feast while having brunch with friends. And not like, I know when you play tabletop, you often have to like pause, get the food so we can all eat.
Yeah.
Or the players are eating, the DM is not. That's what tends to happen with me. I let the players eat, but I can't pay attention.
I'm usually panicking, be like, shit, they went left. What the hell do I do?
Right. But that game, you have to eat while playing it. And then this game, someone once told me, oh yeah, it's like foreplay. And then I'm like, yeah, I feel like really nerdy. And the theme of the game is horny teenage demigods wanting to have sex. Yeah. Right? So like you're telling stories about horniness as well. So like, that's the idea.
That's awesome.
I actually want to, I have to think about it and make a game where you have to actually perform sex acts as part of the game. It'll even harder to play test, of course. But that is an ambition to have, because of this whole verb thing. Like, we celebrate a lot of things in games, mainly killing. We should celebrate other things in games, like sexuality, which is a beautiful thing that humans engage in.
Yeah.
Lizzie Stark has this quote, which is like, we play killing, we do not play sex. Why is that, right?
I think as a society, we accept killing more than we accept
which
sex.
I always think is weird, right? Like, yeah, a 13-year-old can see like all this murder, but they can't see people loving each other.
Yeah.
What would you rather have them do when they're an adult? Think about that. Right? So
we're going to wrap things up. Before we do, I like to ask this question a lot. It doesn't have to be the favorite, but favorite video game, favorite tabletop game.
Okay, tabletop has lots of kinds, right? So favorite board game, the different from favorite role-playing game, the different from favorite LARPs, right?
Okay.
So, favorite video game, I'm gonna be dated and say Planescape Torment.
Oh man,
is probably my favorite video game. Torment Tides of Numenera comes very close, and I really play Heroes of the Storm a lot. I don't know if that counts as favorite, but I play it a lot because I like it a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite, but I like it a lot.
You thought about, like, if you move into the more video game stuff, doing a MOBA?
Making one? Oh my god, I don't know. I mean, I wrote an analytical article about Heroes of the Storm for a magazine once.
So if you do a MOBA about eating, I feel like you could really get it.
Yeah, like competitive eating MOBA. And so those are my favorite video game is Planescape Torment. Though, there are other, like, I love Dishonored, for example. Dishonored was really, really good. Again, I'm not against games about killing. I just think we can do other games as well.
There's more options.
Right?
There's untapped potential.
When I teach my students, I'm like, you can make a game about killing as an indie game designer, but do you know who makes a lot of games about killing and has a lot of money to do so? AAA studios. You're not going to make a better game about killing than them. So make something else. But that's video games. Then tabletop games, board games, I think Chaos in the Old World is one of my favorite board games. It's my favorite complex board game. It is out of print now. unfortunately, but I have a copy. It is flawed. The end game is flawed. It becomes kingmakery, where you can decide who the winner is, sort of.
Oh.
Because there will always be like two-ish people neck and neck, and so the others can kind of help one or the other.
Right. People choose favorite.
Right. But for me, board games aren't about winning. Board games are about the playing.
Yeah.
Maybe to win, but not the winning itself. And so the mid game is amazing and scheming and amazing, and you're backstabbing, which is what you're playing Demon Lords. Of course, you're backstabbing and like so good. And I also like Lords of Waterdeep. Is a fabulous board game. People are like, oh, a good gateway board game is Settlers of Catan. I do not like Settlers of Catan. I dislike it.
I'm sorry, as someone who helps run like a gaming channel, I feel awful saying that, but I'm not a big Settlers of Catan.
If you like Settlers of Catan, more power to you. I do not like Settlers of Catan. And when people are like, I've never played games before, people are like, play that up. Like, no, we're going to play Lords of Waterdeep. Because it is both good as an intro game for like people, what is a strategy game, what is a worker game, what is a Euro game. It also has deep strategy that you can get into if you're a seasoned gamer, and if you're into that, if you want to think strategically and stuff that way. It is an excellent game. I highly recommend it. Favorite role-playing games right now? I play D&D a lot. So I don't think it's fair to say that's my favorite role-playing game, because it's so old that it's been tainted like it's not original anymore, right? Yeah. So I like it a lot, but when I thought super interesting role-playing games are Blades in the Dark by John Harper. It is amazing. It uses flashbacks as a mechanic to make it makes you feel like Ocean's 11. It's a game about heists.
Okay.
And the problem in many role-playing games is if you are a level 20 rogue and you are doing a heist and then a trap happens and you die, right? If you're a level 20 rogue with a 17 intelligence, your character probably knows a lot about traps much more than the player, right?
Yeah.
And so the mistake you make as a player shouldn't have been made by the character. So it feels kind of weird, like, but my character would have known to watch out for that kind of. He's a level 20 rogue, right?
Right.
Blade in the Dark does a flashback mechanic where you don't start with any equipment, you play the heist, and then you can say flashback. That guard over there, last week I met up with him and I bribed him, so he's gonna let us through. Flash forward again. And then the DM's like, the guard looks sideways and quickly opens the door for you. You know? So it makes you feel like you're prepared. It's like Ocean's 11, which shows flashback scenes, right? They did this a day ago.
Well, really, as the idea of like, what makes a good heist movie is usually the twists.
And you throw in these twists. And like equipment, you just say, I'm carrying 3 items or 5 items or 7. That's what you say at the start. And then you're like, of course I have the sleeping draft with me, and check off one of your 3 items, right? So that is so clever. Blades in the Dark is an amazing...
items like spell slots in D&D.
Sort of, yeah. It is an amazing system, and it's the same author as the one I mentioned earlier, the free RPG. The free RPG, the one I mentioned that inspired me. Lady Blackbird. It's the same author. And I'm like, of course it's the same author. They're both brilliant games. It's really good. And then my other tied with that is Bluebeard's Bride, where the game mechanics actively model the theme, which is domestic violence and sexual abuse. Are actively modeled by the game, and it is a very well done game, and it's amazing. So those are my favorite. Tabletop, my favorite LARP. Lots of types of analog game. LARP. Blockbuster LARP, Just Little Loving, which is about gay men, queer people, not just gay men, I was a gay man. Queer people with AIDS in the 80s is really emotionally effective and amazing. New World Magiscola, I had a great time playing as a student there. So those are my 2 favorite blockbuster LARPs, my 2 favorite not blockbuster LARPs. I would say Tomb Priestesses of the Nameless Dead is a little indie LARP which inspired by Ursula Le Guin's Tombs of Atuan, which is the sequel to Wizard of Earthsea, where you play tomb priestesses taking care of this temple thing. And there's a great mechanic where if you are not in a scene, you put a shroud on and you whisper evil things into the ears of everyone else as one of the Nameless Dead. And that was amazing. My character, I planned for her to be this like strict but like kind woman, ended up like murdering the high priestess and trying to usurp because of the things the ghost whispered in my ears. Oh my God. That was an excellent LARP. And then Sign by Thorny Games is a LARP about deaf Nicaraguan children creating their own sign language. And it is based on actual historical event where deaf Nicaraguan children were brought to a school to teach them lip reading, and instead they made up their own sign language. And it's a power of like resilient human spirit and effort. And in this game, you do not talk. You make up your own sign language, and one of the creators is a linguist, the other one's a cryptographer, like actual PhDs, right?
Oh my God.
And you play this game, you are like, I made up my own sign language in an hour and a half, and I can understand it when other people use it. And that happens. It happens in the game, and it is amazing. And you play this game, and you're like, what? And like the first time I played it, the facilitator was not playing. Sometimes they can play, sometimes they don't play. And that time the facilitator was not playing, and he was like, yeah, after round one, I had no idea what you were saying anymore. Because your sign language, you had made up this language, and I, as a facilitator, outside person, had no idea what's going on anymore. And the second time I played it, I was the facilitator and a player, and it was very interesting doing that. But yeah, like you make up I'm actually running that game at the Medici Group's corporate retreat that we're having for the company.
That's great.
Because again, like I said, part of our company's philosophy is being exposed to lots of different things, and I'm a game person, and they're like, yeah, Sharang, recommend a good game, we're gonna play it on our retreat and see what happens. So it's a phenomenal game by Thorny Games. I would check it out. It's called Sign, a game about being understood. It was also nominated for Indiecade. They were like next to me.
Oh, great.
At Indiecade. I'll just say one more.
Yeah, please. No,
there's
you're
one more.
Blow my mind of what's out there.
Okay, two more. Sorry. There are these two last ones, I promise. But there are these two tabletop RPGs that I really like. There are too many, right? As a game designer, I play a lot of games, and there are too many I like. They're all different, right? So Swords Without Master by Apadar Ravachol and Lovecraft-esque by Black Armada Games, I'm sorry, I don't remember the authors' names, are two role-playing games that are really cool because the players don't play with characters and stats, they play with literary tropes. The thing you have control over is the meta level of the game. You change literary tropes. So in Swords Without Master, you're like, the tone is now going to be sad. Or, sorry, it's glum or jovial, I think.
Okay.
So you control the tone, and then the players have to respond to that. And you control symbols. So in Swords Without Master, you say, this is so someone describes, I crawled across the desert on my hands and knees, and I looked up in the sky, and a bird wheeled across the sun. So I'm like, that's a symbol I want to use in the game. So they write down a lone bird across the sun, and that symbol will somehow show up later in the game.
Oh my
So you're using tone and symbolism as your game mechanics, right? Normally in like D&D, you play the character, and then tone and symbols arise,
They can
right?
happen.
Same thing with Lovecraft-esque. You all play you move on one character, and you add like this complication happens in the narrative. Like the narrative changes this way. And so those two games are very clever in that the playthings of the game are the meta level literary tropes. So I would recommend that. Lovecraft-esque. Also, Lovecraft-esque is really good because they were like, we want to make a Lovecraftian horror game, but the key of Lovecraftian horror is fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
So if the game has Shoggoths in it,
You know it.
everyone knows it. If you're into everyone knows what a Shoggoth is or a Nego is. Like, that is not Fear the Unknown anymore.
There's enough DeviantArt out there. That
Right? Everyone knows about that. So they made a game that's called Lovecraft-esque. We're using the same themes of Lovecraft, the unknown and creeping horror and unknowable, unconquerable things without any trope of Lovecraft. And they also very astutely grapple with the idea that a lot of Lovecraftian fiction from its time was misogynistic, was very racist, and dealt with mental health in unproductive ways. And so the book has essays on mental health, race, and that kind of thing. And that's a really cool thing they did. And I think, I was really pleased to hear when the new edition of Vampire the Masquerade, they decided, you know what, we're going to include essays on fascism and sexual abuse. Because in traditionally Vampire, the game is about monsters. And in vampires in literature are a trope for sexual abuse and assault anyway, right? But in Vampire, these monsters are doing mean things all the time. They're bad, right? And so it's really cool that, like, I think games should exist that let you grapple with these, just like Bluebeard's Bride, a horror game where you're leading this woman across this horrible path. But the game discusses that in an interesting, intelligent way. Same thing with the new Vampire. I was really pleased that I know some people who worked on some of those essays. So they announced, by the way, we're writing these essays. And I was really pleased because I'm like, cool, the people who know about this, they didn't just take a rando. Hey, can you throw in a chapter about, people who know about safety in role-playing games, which is very important, contributed essays about how do you deal with these strong issues in a game like this. And that made me very happy. And Lovecraft S does that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I talk a lot.
No. Honestly, it's perfect for this. And I know this has all been absolutely fantastic. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're up to?
So I announce all my things on Twitter, which is at Sharang Biswas, and the link will probably be here, so I don't have to spell it out for you. My website is also linked to my Twitter. It's sharangbiswas.myportfolio.com, where you can see all my stuff. And then the stuff that you can buy, because a lot of my games were in like galleries and stuff, so sucks to be you. You can't access that anymore. But my itch page, my itch name is Astrolingus, which was my fraternity house name from undergrad. The star-tongued. My itch page has 3 of my games. It has Feast, it has Vergier for Pay What You Want, and it has one of my interactive fiction games as well about melodramatic vampire gay romances. It's very melodramatic. I love it. So those are my 3 main places where you can find where I regularly update and post and things.
Well, that's great. Well, we'll be sure to have links to all the games mentioned.
You should link the games that by other people.
No, exactly. I think
they're great games.
This has been. You made a joke about talking a lot, but to be perfectly honest, I think you've, as someone who's been paying attention to the industry. Oh, there's a lot I don't know about. Apparently,
you can never know all of it, right?
True.
Like people are like, why haven't you embarrassing thing? I didn't really know what Fortnite was until a month ago, right? I've been out of the video game journalism bit for a little bit. I still do it occasionally, but I don't do it as much anymore. So I knew there was a super popular game, Fortnite, and then I'm like, only kids are playing it. Adults play it less. I'm like, whatever. That's mean, I know, but that was my mindset. And then I'm like, let me figure out what is this game? The people they're like, it's like Battle Royale and PUBG and stuff. I'm like, oh, I finally know what this thing is. So you know what? You can never know all.
That's fair. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me, and thank you guys for watching. Be sure to, as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification in the corner so you know every time.
And support indie game designers. Buy their games.
Absolutely.
Even if it's pay what you want, pay $1. It helps them.
I think that's absolutely great. Thank you so much. This was awesome, guys, and have a good night.